Mike's house was always the heart of family gatherings. He loved his role as the friendly host, grilling burgers on the barbecue while kids ran around his spacious backyard. Nina and Lisa, the twins, were among the most joyful participants, treating Mike like their personal hero. They were around 10 when they first started calling him Uncle Mike. Even though they weren't related by blood, they'd pull him into their games, asking him to watch as they performed synchronized dives into the pool or showed off their cartwheels. Mike found their childlike innocence endearing and felt a sense of protective responsibility toward them. At the time, he couldn't have imagined anything but familial affection for the girls. They were sweet, bubbly, and unguarded. His relationship with them was simple, anchored in laughter and trust. As the years passed, the twins blossomed into confident young women, their childhood exuberance replaced with a magnetic presence. At 21, Nina and Lisa were no longer the giggling little girls Mike remembered. Their style was bold, their conversations full of sharp wit, and their confidence intoxicating. Mike noticed the change at one of his summer cookouts. Nina, in a fitted sundress, playfully teased him about his grilling skills, while Lisa laughed and gave him a conspiratorial look. Their interactions seemed charged, their teasing no longer innocent. He tried to brush it off as youthful confidence, but the feeling lingered. Their playful nudges felt deliberate, their laughs louder when he was around. Though Mike didn't understand why, he found himself hyper-aware of their presence. It was the beginning of an unspoken tension that neither acknowledged but both seemed to sense. The twins had a reputation for playing games. Their shared Instagram account showcased their daring adventures, from wild parties to impromptu road trips. Among their friends, they were notorious for pushing boundaries. They loved attention, and sometimes their games involved manipulation. One evening, Mike overheard a conversation between the twins and their friends. They were laughing about a boy they had toyed with, each taking turns to see who could make him fall harder. It was a game to them, a way to flex their control. Mike couldn't believe what he was hearing. He tried to distance himself, but the twins' magnetism pulled him in. They were charismatic, unpredictable, and reckless. Despite his unease, Mike found himself increasingly drawn to their energy, even when it felt dangerous. The shift from innocence to transgression began subtly, but quickly spiraled out of control. One evening, the twins stayed late at Mike's house after a family dinner. Everyone else had left, leaving the three of them alone. The atmosphere was unusually relaxed, but charged with an undercurrent of tension. Nina, holding a glass of wine, leaned against the counter. "Mike, you've lived such a safe life. Don't you ever wonder what it's like to break free a little?" Lisa chuckled, swirling her drink. "He doesn't strike me as the risk-taking type, Nina." Their comments were playful on the surface, but their tone hinted at something deeper. When Nina reached out to brush an imaginary crumb off his shoulder, her fingers lingered. Mike's heart raced, a mix of confusion and unease flooding him. It didn't stop there. Over the weeks, the twins continued their flirtations. Nina accidentally brushed her hand against his when passing the salt at a family gathering. Lisa sent him a seemingly innocent text. "You looked great in that shirt today," followed by a winking emoji. Though Mike told himself it was harmless, he couldn't deny the excitement it stirred. He avoided looking too closely at his feelings, pushing the guilt to the back of his mind. What began as subtle flirtations escalated into outright transgressions. Late one night, Mike received a text from Nina. "Can't sleep. Wish I could talk to you." Against his better judgment, he responded. The conversation turned personal, then flirtatious. The next day, Lisa sent him a photo of herself at the beach, her expression playful, her bikini revealing. The caption read, "Missed you today." The messages became a daily occurrence, each one pushing the boundaries further. One evening after a family barbecue, Lisa cornered Mike in the kitchen. The house was quiet. Everyone else had gone. "You're not like other men," she whispered, stepping closer. Before he could respond, she kissed him. Mike froze, torn between shock and temptation. He knew it was wrong, but he didn't stop her. Instead, he kissed her back. It was the beginning of a secret affair. From that point on, his interactions with the twins became increasingly complicated. Nina discovered the affair and confronted him, not with anger but with a smile. "You're ours now," she said, pulling him into another kiss. They took turns meeting him in secret, keeping their involvement a game between them. Mike felt trapped, but the allure of their attention and the thrill of the forbidden kept him coming back. As the weeks went by, the twins grew increasingly confident in their hold over Mike. They pushed their boundaries further, testing just how far they could manipulate him without consequence. What had started as a flirtation turned into a dangerous game of control. Mike felt the weight of their influence growing heavier with each passing day. One evening, at a family dinner, Lisa leaned in close as Mike reached for the salad bowl, her hand brushing against his. "Mike, you've been looking a little tense lately," she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "You know, we could help you relax." She winked, and though Mike tried to push back the rising tension inside him, he couldn't help but notice the way she held his gaze. Nina's presence wasn't any less commanding. She seemed to know exactly what to say at any given moment to make Mike feel guilty for even considering pulling away. "I know what you're thinking," she said one evening when they were alone at the house, "that maybe it's time to step back, but you don't have to. We don't want to hurt you. We're not like that." The problem, Mike realized, was that the twins didn't want to let him go. They wanted to keep him under their thumb, both as an object of desire and as a pawn in their cruel game of dominance. The more they tightened their grip, the more Mike's internal world began to fracture. He had started to pull away from his fiancée Stephanie without realizing the depths of the consequences. Every text, every whispered comment, every shared moment felt like a trap, but he couldn't see his way out. Stephanie was no fool. Though she had always trusted Mike, she began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. He was distant, distracted, and sometimes evasive. He would come home later than usual, and when he did, his mind seemed elsewhere. The passion that had once ignited between them had dwindled, replaced with an unsettling coldness. One night, as Mike showered, Stephanie felt an overwhelming need to confront the growing distance between them. She scrolled through his phone, checking his messages, something she never imagined she would have to do. The texts she found were chilling. Nina had texted him that morning. "Had a great time last night, can't wait to see you again. Let's make this our little secret." Lisa's messages weren't much better. "You look so good in that shirt at dinner. Can't stop thinking about you." Stephanie's heart dropped as she read through the exchanges. There was more, so much more. Photos, flirty, suggestive words. Mike had been betraying her with the twins for months. Devastated but resolute, Stephanie decided to take action. She knew she had to find out the whole truth before she could confront him. There was no turning back now. Stephanie's discovery of the affair sent a shockwave through her life, but the moment of clarity also marked the beginning of her strategy to take back control. What began as heartbreak gradually transformed into a consuming need for vengeance. The twins, Nina and Lisa, had manipulated Mike, pulling him into their world of deceit and desire. But now Stephanie was no longer going to be the passive observer. She was going to fight back. The twins, arrogant and self-assured in their dominance, saw themselves as untouchable. They continued to manipulate Mike, using every tactic in their arsenal, guilt, desire, and fear, to keep him tethered to them. They didn't realize, however, that Stephanie had begun to turn the tables. She understood their game now. Their power came from controlling others' emotions, getting inside their heads, and exploiting vulnerabilities. But Stephanie had one advantage they couldn't foresee. She was aware of their manipulation. This gave her the key to unraveling their control. To enact her plan, Stephanie had to be subtle and patient. She couldn't just confront Mike directly, as it would push him further into their arms. Instead, she began sowing seeds of doubt, starting with the people around the twins. She quietly approached former associates and friends of Nina and Lisa, gathering information on their patterns of manipulation and control. But Stephanie didn't stop there. She began working on Mike, appearing to offer him support while simultaneously positioning herself as the one who truly cared for him. Slowly, she began pulling him back into her world, reminding him of their past, of their shared dreams and promises. Each small gesture, every word spoken, chipped away at the illusion the twins had built around him. It wasn't going to be easy, but Stephanie knew that if she was careful, the twins' hold on Mike would weaken, just enough for her to make her final move. The twins had played their power game for too long, but Stephanie was about to play it better. Stephanie knew that any direct confrontation with Nina and Lisa would backfire. They were masters of manipulation, and if she went after them head-on, she would lose. Instead, she needed to think several steps ahead. She spent weeks planning, gathering evidence, and quietly positioning herself in a way that would expose the twins for what they truly were, dangerous and calculating. Stephanie's first move was to expose the twins' influence over Mike without him realizing it. She started by ensuring Mike was around when she spoke to mutual friends and family about the twins' manipulative tactics. She made subtle remarks, drawing comparisons between the twins' behavior and common traits of emotional abusers. Next, she sought the help of a private investigator, Lena Reed, someone who had experience in dealing with high-stakes, emotionally charged situations. Together, they began digging into the twins' past. They discovered a chilling pattern. Nina and Lisa had been involved in similar manipulations with other men, pushing them to the brink of despair before casting them aside once they had drained everything they could. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. This was not just a game of jealousy, it was about power and control. Stephanie also started collecting evidence of the twins' involvement with Mike. She saved text messages, recorded conversations where legal, and kept track of every sign of coercion she could find. She knew that exposing the twins' past and showing Mike the evidence would make it impossible for him to deny what had been happening. But there was one more critical element to Stephanie's plan. She needed to confront Mike in a way that would force him to see the truth. She had to break through his confusion and the emotional fog the twins had cast around him. The plan was to make him face the betrayal head-on, but not in a way that pushed him further away. It had to be something that would make him realize he was a pawn in a much darker game than he had ever imagined. The evening was heavy with tension as Stephanie sat across from Mike in the dimly lit restaurant. It was the moment of truth, the culmination of months of calculated moves, heartache, and planning. Stephanie had never felt such a cocktail of emotions: hope, fear, and even a touch of bitterness. She knew that this confrontation could either free her or destroy what was left of her connection with Mike. Mike had been distant for weeks, lost in a fog of confusion, guilt, and the twins' twisted web of influence. But now, Stephanie had him where she wanted him, at a moment of reckoning where his choices would no longer be clouded by manipulation. She slid the envelope across the table, her hands steady despite the chaos that raged inside her. "This is it, Mike. This is everything you need to see. The truth," she said softly, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of vulnerability. Mike hesitated, staring at the envelope as though it contained poison. He reached for it slowly, as if afraid of what might spill out. When he opened it, his eyes went wide. The photographs, texts, and the detailed timeline of events all fell into place. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and blurry, suddenly snapped together into a horrific picture of deception and control. Stephanie watched him, silent, still, waiting for his reaction. She knew that nothing she said could change what he was seeing, but she needed him to understand the depths of the manipulation he'd been subjected to. It wasn't just the affair, it was a calculated campaign by Nina and Lisa to break him down emotionally, to exploit his vulnerabilities, and ultimately to control him. Mike's face turned pale as the weight of the truth sank in. His hands trembled as he sifted through the evidence. "Stephanie, I didn't realize, I didn't see it." His voice cracked, the guilt heavy on his chest. She shook her head, her expression softening. "You were blinded by them, Mike. They made you believe you were in control when you were never in control at all. They manipulated you, they played on your fears, your insecurities, and your love for them, but you don't have to keep living in that lie." For the first time in what felt like years, Mike looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, truly seeing her. There was pain in his eyes, regret, but also a flicker of clarity. "I was a fool, I should have seen it. I was so lost in their world." Stephanie took a deep breath. "It's not too late, Mike. You can walk away from them, you can choose something real, something honest, but you have to decide right now." Mike looked at the evidence, then back at Stephanie. His gaze was no longer clouded by confusion, but by an overwhelming sense of shame. He had been used, and worse, he had allowed himself to be used, but now the veil was lifted. He wasn't just the man caught in their web, he was the man who could break free. With a heavy heart, he finally spoke. "I want to be free, Stephanie. I want to make things right, if I can." Stephanie nodded, relieved. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning of healing. Together, they would face the consequences of the decisions that had been made, and together, they would find a way forward, no matter how difficult it might be. After the intense confrontation between Stephanie and Mike, and his subsequent admission of the truth, the battle was far from over. While their personal relationship had taken a significant turn, Stephanie knew that it wasn't enough to simply confront Mike. There were larger forces at play, forces that had manipulated not only Mike but many others over the years. The twins, Nina and Lisa, had been expertly controlling the narrative, and it was time for the truth to come to light. Stephanie was resolved to expose Nina and Lisa for who they truly were, but she understood that she couldn't do this alone. She needed solid evidence to bring them down, proof that was irrefutable. After consulting with her lawyer and reaching out to trusted friends, Stephanie contacted Detective Marcus Hall, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving complex cases. Marcus had been aware of Nina and Lisa's manipulative behavior for some time, but had never had enough evidence to make an arrest. They were clever, skilled in playing the victim, and adept at covering their tracks. However, with Stephanie's insider knowledge and the pieces she had gathered from her personal experience, they now had an advantage. The investigation unfolded methodically. Lena Reed, a private investigator Stephanie had hired, worked tirelessly alongside Marcus, scouring through social media profiles, phone records, and financial statements. Slowly, the cracks in Nina and Lisa's web began to appear. They had always been careful, but their confidence in their manipulation left traces. From fraudulent business deals to hidden affairs and coerced relationships, the investigation uncovered a disturbing pattern of emotional and financial abuse, all orchestrated with a chilling precision. Stephanie's role in this phase was pivotal. She reached out to the people who had been involved with the twins in the past, men who had been drawn into their games and discarded when they were no longer useful. She even tracked down ex-business partners and associates who had been negatively impacted by the twins' underhanded tactics. It wasn't easy. Some were reluctant to speak out, fearing backlash from the twins' powerful network. But slowly, they came forward, sharing their stories, recounting how Nina and Lisa had manipulated them for their own gain. One crucial breakthrough came when an ex-boyfriend of Nina's, who had been almost completely financially drained by her manipulation, agreed to testify. His testimony was damning. The pieces finally started to fit together, revealing a clear pattern of emotional exploitation, blackmail, and deceit. With this evidence in hand, Detective Hall and his team moved forward with gathering more concrete proof, and they soon obtained access to private bank accounts and communication logs that confirmed the twins had been involved in large-scale fraudulent activities. Stephanie could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. The evidence was overwhelming. The twins' reign of manipulation was coming to an end, and justice was within reach. The investigation had built up a formidable case against Nina and Lisa, and now the time had come to confront them head-on. The twins had lived their lives with a sense of invulnerability, always believing they were above reproach. But as their world began to unravel, their demeanor shifted from confident to desperate. They tried every trick in the book, using their charm, playing the victim, and attempting to manipulate those around them into siding with them. But no one was fooled anymore. The police had gathered enough evidence to arrest them, and as the final act loomed, Stephanie's heart pounded in anticipation. She knew that the truth would expose the twins for what they were, but she also feared the repercussions. The twins weren't just skilled manipulators, they were ruthless. As much as they were criminals, they were also adept at playing on people's sympathies, and they could turn public opinion against anyone who dared to challenge them. Still, Stephanie had made her decision. She couldn't allow Nina and Lisa to continue harming others. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of control. She wasn't just reacting to their actions anymore, she was orchestrating the final act of this long, twisted story. The arrest went smoothly at first. Police descended on Nina and Lisa's mansion, and the twins were taken into custody without incident. It was surreal. All the months of planning, gathering evidence, and working with the investigation team had led to this moment. Stephanie, although relieved, couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. The twins had been so close to her at one point, and now they were facing the consequences of their behavior. The trial was the next stage, and it was even more intense than Stephanie had imagined. Both twins denied the charges and attempted to play the role of innocent, misunderstood women. They spun elaborate lies, claiming that they had been wronged and manipulated by others, especially Mike. However, the mountain of evidence against them was undeniable. The testimonies from victims combined with the financial records, the blackmail threats, and the manipulative tactics painted a devastating picture. Stephanie was called as a witness, and she took the stand with a sense of purpose. As she recounted her own experiences, her love for Mike, her discovery of the truth, and the manipulation she had endured, it was clear that the jury was moved by her bravery. Her testimony was the final blow that shattered the twins' carefully constructed defense. defense. As the trial concluded and the verdict was read aloud, the twins were found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, manipulation, and emotional abuse. They were sentenced to prison where they would serve time for their crimes. Stephanie, though emotionally drained, felt a profound sense of closure. The reckoning had arrived. The twins would no longer be able to control anyone else with their toxic web of lies and deceit. As the dust settled, Stephanie reflected on the long journey she had just been through. The trial was over, but the healing process had just begun. She had exposed the truth, fought for justice, and reclaimed her life. But what now? What happened after the story was told and the criminals were behind bars? How did she rebuild the pieces of her life after all the trauma? The path forward was uncertain. There would be moments of doubt, and the scars from the emotional abuse would linger. But Stephanie knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let her past define her. She had proven that she was stronger than the twins' manipulation, stronger than the lies they had spun, and stronger than the darkness that had tried to consume her. As the final chapter closed on this harrowing tale, Stephanie couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the lessons she had learned. The truth had a way of rising to the surface, no matter how deep it was buried. She had found her own voice and had fought for what was right even when it seemed impossible. As the audience, you might be left with lingering questions. What happens when the manipulative forces in your life are exposed? How do you heal after such a betrayal? And what role do you play in taking back control of your life? Stephanie's story is a testament to the power of truth, resilience, and justice. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, there's always a way forward. Thank you for following Stephanie's journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more compelling tales of courage, justice, and healing. Stay tuned for future updates, insights, and deeper dives into other stories of triumph over adversity.